Okay, we have reached a half hour and we'll be getting started with today's webinar. But first, I'd like to introduce our speakers. WebCourseWorks VP of Sales and Service, Amber Winter, and WebCourseWorks VP of Technology Solutions, Dr. Andy Hicken. Amber and Andy, take it away.
All right, thank you, Odessa. All right, well, thank you everybody for joining us today. So Andy and I are going to try to answer questions and cover the kind of biggest questions that you have right now around bringing your events online. So a lot of our clients have been asking how they can use the learning management system to support their live events. And then we've also had other organizations wondering how to support a virtual conference. So we'll try to cover both of those today. We'll start off with talking about using our system, CourseStage LMS, for supporting virtual events. And then we'll go into some best practices for that, looking at the different elements of your conference and how to support them in a live or virtual environment. We have some examples to share with you, and we'll answer any questions that you have as we go through. If you do have questions, you can send them in through the questions pane in GoToWebinar, and then Odessa will let Andy and I know as questions come up throughout the webinar. So these are some of the big questions that you guys have right now and that we've seen. One of the scariest ones is, will live conferences still be a viable revenue generator for associations? Number two, what do we do about conferences that we've already had to cancel? So are you going to try and replace your March and April conferences with a virtual event? Are you postponing them? What can you do and what are your options? And then lastly, how do you recreate the conference experience virtually? There's a lot of networking and peer-to-peer contact at live events that there are ways to enhance that virtually. So we'll talk about those today. All right, so I will talk a lot about CourseStage LMS because a lot of the folks on this webinar are our clients using our system. However, we do also have another platform that's specifically for virtual events. So if you are an organization that just needs to do a virtual event right now and doesn't need an actual learning management system, kind of a full-blown integrated solution, there is another option, and we'll talk about that towards the end of the webinar. But here's just some screenshots to show you that it's possible. We have experience doing it, and we'd be available to help you if you need to. Okay, so talking about the learning management system for a second. So a lot of advantages to looking at using your current software that you already have if you need to replace your conference with a virtual platform. If you already have an LMS, if it's ours or somebody else's, one of the biggest benefits is the transition. So it's already integrated generally with your association management system for registration. You don't have to set up a whole nother registration process, and your users are likely already used to that registration process as they generally purchase their conference reg from your AMS as well. Your users are already familiar with your learning management system, and your staff are already familiar with the system. So just the familiarity in general will be really helpful during this critical time, and that's one of the benefits of using the system. The next advantage of using your LMS would be having your evaluations and credit claiming certificates, kind of monitoring all of the various elements of the conference, not just the educational sessions, but some of the more logistical items that, you know, attendees at a live conference might be actually filling out evaluations on paper, and then it's a lot of work for your staff. Using your LMS will help streamline that process. Even in a virtual event and a live event as well, if you were still doing live events. So that's really what an LMS is built for. So you have that advantage that you should see a lot of streamlined efficiencies by using your system in order to track and manage credit claiming as well. And then lastly, for marketing, just because your event isn't held live anymore doesn't mean you can't still engage those vendors and sponsors. There's a ton you can do in a virtual environment to provide sponsors with engagement activities. We'll talk about virtual exhibit halls, live chats, setting up meetings like this or actual virtual meetings with sponsors and with the salespeople to give them an opportunity to communicate with your attendees in a virtual environment. So there's a lot you can do to continue to engage your sponsors throughout a virtual event as well. Anything to add to that, Andy?
No, I think as we're about to see that there are a lot of tools in Course Stage that you can use to really recreate the conference experience virtually. So I think we're just going to talk about one quick client example. So this is the Society of Interventional Radiology, or SIR. This is an example of using the LMS in conjunction with a live conference, a conference that is still place-based, has things happening, at a conference hall with people sharing the same space as we're traditionally used to. And I think the point here is that a lot of the infrastructure that we have in Course Stage, or that you'll find in other association LMSs, was built out to support these kinds of use cases. So SIR's done a really good job of building an attractive annual conference layout in the LMS.
Mm-hmm. Good. So how do we move that to virtual? There's a lot of things that we want to look at and consider when you're making the move to virtual from a live event.
Yeah, and I think the point here is we're going to go through the elements of what are the live event models for associations, and then how do you move each of those, what would be a corollary of each of those elements as you move things online. So we'll talk from a high level about the different levels of production that you can do. So Amber, you want to talk about that?
Yeah, so this is what we've seen in the past and even right now as our association clients are considering moving their virtual events online. There's really kind of 3 different production values. There's a lot of different ways you could do it, right? But we're trying to break it into to simplify the options you have. So kind of the lowest level of effort, the lowest cost is doing webinars and webinar series. Generally, associations already have webinar tools, like we're on GoToWebinar right now. So you likely already have the software you need to support something like this. And that's really the lowest production value and cost to move a live event into a series of webinars. So that's kind of production value 1. Production value 2 would be taking it to the next level and actually pre-recording sessions with your speakers. That gives you more control over things like lighting, the backdrop that they have behind them. If they have any technical difficulties, you can really kind of increase the value of that recorded session, and then have your presenters moderating live at the time that recording is playing. So then they're also able to answer questions of actual attendees live while they're not while they're presenting, because they already recorded it. So that's kind of a next step in level of effort, because you've got to coordinate all the pre-recordings, also the live moderation of chat, and kind of putting that together in a system, which you can use your LMS for. And then go ahead, Andy.
I'm sorry. No, go. I didn't mean to interrupt your flow, Amber. Go ahead.
You're good. Okay, so then production value 3 is just really looking at recreating the live conference in a virtual environment. So that's what we're going to show examples of today, is recreating a live conference in your LMS or to a virtual event platform using some production services. So that is the higher level of effort, and we can show that example as well.
Great. And I would just say, even though we're talking about the full boat recreating the entire virtual meeting, a lot of what we're going to talk about would apply to even the lower level of production values, like producing a single webinar or a series of webinars. So we're going to use a lot of vocabulary, and we just want to sort of define our terms before we jump in. So 3 different kinds of synchronous live events that you can do online: webinars, virtual meetings, and live streams. Let's just define what those are. So a webinar needs no introduction. You're in a webinar right now. So you have one speaker or a couple of panelists on the screen. There are slides. There's chat for questions. So by the way, if you have questions, please type them into the questions panel, and we hope to have time to take a few questions. And typically your attendees are muted. So an attendee at a webinar is not usually actually speaking and presenting themselves. In contrast to that, you have virtual meetings. In a virtual meeting, it's a meeting. The attendees are speaking. They might be on the webcams themselves. They're not necessarily muted. And you could even pass the presenter mode to them so that they could show their desktop if they had slides or something that they wanted to share. So that's a virtual meeting, and for some of your educational events, virtual meetings might make sense. It might be a tool you would use, although we definitely default to webinars in the association space. And then the third tool you could think about is a live stream. So think of this like having a live video typically of your keynote if you're thinking of a conference. So it's got a little bit more stagecraft about it. It's a little bit more produced. It would often be used for a real live conference so that somebody who couldn't make it to the conference could get a little bit of the flavor of the live event. You would have your speaker on a stage. They are speaking to an audience. You can hear the audience. You might have a moderator who would be able to take questions from a live chat for the virtual attendees and present those to the speaker. So those are three different options that we're going to talk about as tools you could use to recreate the virtual meeting experience. Okay, and then as Amber and I were kind of blocking this out, we thought about how do we organize this? Well, let's go through the elements of a conference. There's a lot going on in a conference, of course, but kind of the three main things you think about are the educational sessions, networking, and then the exhibit hall. Those are the main reasons that participants give for going to associations meetings. So we're going to move through those slide by slide, section by section, and talk about how you can recreate those elements in a virtual environment. So for educational sessions, what kind of educational sessions do you typically think of? Well, you think of pre-conference sessions. So those are longer sessions that you register for separately that happen before the main conference starts. You think of your keynote or multiple keynotes. You might have a keynote for each day. You think of concurrent sessions, also known as breakouts or tracks. So those are all the speakers or faculty who you have presenting at your live event. And then you often think of posters. So those are graphical presentations that are that are available for a persistent amount of time, and they usually have sessions where people can meet the poster presenters. So how would you produce those virtually? Well, if you think of a virtual conference, you might have attended some virtual conferences. A great example is LTD, which is put on by Tagoras, Jeff Cobb, and Celisa Steele. In LTD, there is a pre-conference. It's a kind of it's an orientation to the virtual conference. So in that sense, the pre-conference takes on a little bit more importance. It's not focused on particular subject matter. It's more saying, hey, this is a new experience for many of you. Let's have somebody present about how you navigate this virtual event. Since you haven't been to you might not have been to a virtual conference before, or our format might be a little bit different. We're going to give a more mandatory session that you don't have to register for or pay for separately. You go to it and we introduce this event to you, talk about how it's set up. Your keynote sessions, in many virtual events, these will not, if the event's fully virtual, you're often not looking at a session where a keynote where the keynote speaker is actually standing up on a stage, because that's sort of awkward. there's no audience for them to speak to. So you can think of it more as being like a webinar with a higher production value. Now, if you're doing a hybrid event where you did still have some live attendees but you're focused more on the virtual, then you might think about using the streaming video type of solution. Tracks and concurrent sessions. So these are the real meat where a lot of the organizational work goes into a virtual conference. So you've got different options here. You might think about pre-recorded video for many of your concurrent sessions. Why is that? Well, because when people register for virtual events, they see one of the benefits as being that they're going to be able to have more control over when things happen and how they get access to the content. So they actually tend to want that on-demand kind of video. They see it as part of the value of what they're paying for, that they can access everything. So having some of your sessions be recorded and accessible on demand is valuable for your attendees. But you still want, for your really high profile, really kind of star speakers or faculty, you still want that liveness. So what we recommend is an approach where you have a set of live webinars with only one happening at a time. And that's for your star speakers, your selected set of speakers that you know will have a lot of attendees. And your other speakers are submitting this pre-recorded video. And then you can also think about virtual meetings. If you have sessions that are a little bit more workshop-y, where you want to have the panelists on camera speaking to each other, virtual meetings would be a good solution for that. And finally, posters. So you really just need to be able to share the poster, right? So that's a web page. You might have a PDF download of the poster or whatever kind of format that the poster presenter can give you. And then maybe include some discussion forums. We'll get to discussion forums in a bit for the presenter to answer questions about their poster. Maybe also, if you can swing it, set aside time for the poster presenters to be live, taking questions by chat on their page. So Amber, I ran through a bunch of stuff there. Did you have any thoughts that you wanted to add?
I just want to point out the screenshot we have there of like the different production value you can see. This is from LTD. So you've got Salisa on the top, one of their presenters, and then Jeff Cobb at the bottom. So when we say a higher production value, you don't need a green screen like Jeff has behind him, but there are ways that you can use like lighting and audio, but you can just see the difference. And he's probably their whole conference MC, so they kind of upped the production value of Jeff's webcam and how he was presenting.
Yeah, and you should think about lighting, you should think about sound for those higher value presentations, especially the keynote. So Jeff has a backdrop. He's not lit himself, and he's got a nice headset.
Okay, so do you want me to talk about vocab?
Yeah, why don't you go for it while I take a drink of coffee?
Sounds good. So again, on the vocab, so now we're talking about communication tools and how you can enhance that, kind of the networking that we'll go into. So 3 different types of communication. So we've got chats, forums, and messaging. A chat is live, which means it's live or synchronous. Chats are usually happening at a designated time, although you can just kind of chat with people as well if you have a chat tool. It can also be moderated, so you can have a chat with somebody that's posting, what do you think about this? Or like really facilitating the conversation. So you can facilitate conversation in chat. As a company, we use Slack. So Slack is a variation of a chat. In a virtual event, usually you'll have a chat tool. In our LMS, we have a live chat feature that you can use to facilitate live chats. A forum is asynchronous, so it's not happening all at the same time, and it's persistent. It's usually public. You can, put forums into groups, so you could restrict who gets access to specific forums. They can be moderated or not. But a forum is generally like a Q&A, or users, attendees might be posting questions, and then other attendees could be responding with their thoughts. And it's kind of like a wall of conversation. So a variation of this is thinking about like a Facebook group that has a wall of all of the posts that people have talked about, commented, posted, and shared information on. It's not necessarily live where they're all there at the same time. You can go back and see what the conversation has been. And then messaging. Messaging is a form of private communication. It's live or asynchronous, and you have control over who's included in messages. And it's generally not moderated. So messages are just like your Facebook Messenger, where I pick if I want to send a message to Andy Hicken, I can message with Andy, or we can invite more people into our private conversation. And these are all forms of communication that we're going to talk about how to include in your virtual event.
Great, and I would just add, each of these tools has many variations, right? Like there's the kind of chat that you see in a virtual meeting. Then there's the kind of chat you see in this webinar we're in right now, where the chat for an attendee is limited to questions. Some virtual event platforms allow open chat between the attendees in webinars. There's also the layer of adding multimedia on top of these. So a lot of tools will let people obviously upload videos or link to videos, upload images, other kinds of tools like that.
Yeah, and I see Emily had a question. So Emily's question was, how can you ensure your speakers have appropriate cameras and audio when they're less tech savvy? Great question. What we recommend doing is doing a practice session with your presenters so that you can have visibility into what they have access to. We've gone so far as sending headsets to speakers so that they have correct audio and headsets, and then just kind of sending them a list of like best practices. You know, can you be hardwired instead of on Wi-Fi? And just kind of showing them what that looks like. I don't know, Andy, what else you got?
Yeah, I mean, this is so small, but when people are backlit, they look bad. So if you have a source of light in the room, like a window, you know, or a lamp or something, that should go in front of you and not behind you. And there are, our CEO, John Alexson, is in love with these little lights you can order online that will basically put a little light on top of your desk underneath you so that you have good lighting when you're on a webcam. So there are lots of little tricks like that. And like Amber mentioned, if you have somebody who's a real star and you know is going to draw a big crowd to their live event, you might think about mailing them the headset and the light that they should use. The headsets are pretty easy. If you can figure out how to plug in a USB cord, then your headset will probably work. That's still probably easier than Bluetooth, by the way.
Yeah, good. Hope that was helpful, Emily. Okay, so we'll talk about networking then, and what happens at a live conference. So you have a lot of formal networking at live conferences where you have set aside designated times where people are having coffee together, they eat meals together, there are receptions, there are happy hours, exhibit hall hours, etc. And there's also informal networking that happens, and that's when people sit next to each other in a session and start having conversation. They bump into each other around the event, and they set up kind of separate group conversations after they've met with each other and found that they have commonalities. So these are like really important aspects to the live event that you don't want to forget about when you're hosting a virtual conference. So we have some tips for scheduling these into your virtual events. For the formal conversations, you can schedule chat times with moderators to facilitate conversation. So have a virtual coffee hour every morning. Have lunch that's virtual with a live chat. that's, just sending in conversations. Over the past 2 weeks, a lot of our companies have learned how to work remotely now, and it's something that we've even been doing. We have trivia posted in Slack over lunch so that people are communicating with each other and continuing to engage with colleagues. So you
We've
can
had virtual lunch hours over Slack where people can share their webcams and eat lunch together. You should mute yourself if you're chewing, though, in those cases. Yeah.
It's like a best practice.
I think a tip for the chat times is that the moderator should have a few sort of discussion questions to throw out just as sort of icebreakers. A good one is like, hey, where's everybody calling in from? That's sort of the most generic one you can ask, but then get into more sort of subject matter appropriate questions that have to do with whatever the content of your meeting is.
Mm-hmm. Good. Yeah.
So, and then if you want to think about virtual meetings where people are sharing their webcams, a feature that the virtual meeting platforms these days have are called breakout rooms. Zoom is really good at this. So if you use Zoom meetings, you can create breakout rooms so that people within that virtual meeting can go to a separate room, and they'll only see the people who are also in that room. So if you have a large, let's say you had a really large virtual meeting happening, virtual conference, and you wanted to have a lunch break where people could actually see each other and talk on their webcams, you might think about using those breakout rooms almost as like tables that people are sitting at for lunch, so that the webcam sharing and the conversation doesn't get too chaotic with too many people on camera at one time.
Mm-hmm. Good advice. So for informal messaging, these are some features that we'll also talk about that are in our LMS, but you can do person-to-person messaging. One of the things that we encourage is having a way for the attendees to search and find each other in your virtual platform. So if you can post like a list of attendees, people who are active in each session, so that they can click a link to that person's profile and send them a message. That's really helpful for just having visibility into who else is here with me, who am I watching this with, and starting those conversations. You could also have a social media style wall of posts and comments. So if you wanted to supplement your conference with a Facebook group and have a social wall, an actual social wall, or even just doing like a forum in your platform that they can post to if they have any questions or comments. I know that's the approach that LTD takes, is they have a discussion forum that's just open for conversation.
Great. Okay, and let's talk about the exhibit hall last of all, Amber. So think about your live conference. You've got your booths for your vendors. You've got the ability for your conference attendees to meet the vendors and talk to them, kind of look them in the eye, right? You might have some ability for vendors to schedule meetings, and you obviously have sponsorship placement that is connected to your vendors as well. So all of this is really pretty easy to do in a learning management system platform or anything that has the kind of features we've already been talking about. So your booth really can just be a page. So it's a series of pages, one page for each vendor, where they can provide their product videos, demos, provide other kinds of content that they want to provide. And then to be able to actually get in touch with the attendees, you just need to provide those tools we've already been talking about, things like forums, messaging. Maybe as an upsell for your vendors, you have the ability for them to do a live chat or demo. So you let them use your virtual webinar or virtual meeting solution that's integrated to live chat or demo. And then some kind of ability for them to schedule those one-on-one meetings. They probably want to use their own solution for those one-on-one meetings because they're probably tied to some particular way of presenting, like they might be big fans of GoToMeeting, or they might be big fans of Zoom or WebEx or whatever. So what they really just need is the ability to schedule things. You could let them just put in a link to one of those online scheduling apps that you've probably seen. And finally, sponsor placement. So hopefully whatever solution you have has the ability to brand it, to put in logos in particular places. So maybe they go in the footer of your LMS or whatever website you're using, or maybe they go inside blocks. Maybe your top level platinum sponsors have their logo actually in the header. And maybe you can also, obviously, can also put logos in PowerPoints slides for your presentations. Anything I missed there, Amber?
No, I think that's good. Jen had a question for ideas for how to give attendees incentives to visit the vendor pages.
Giveaways.
Yeah. You could also do things like offer badges. So if you want to kind of gamify the virtual conference, you can use things like badging. You can have set times where the vendors are doing like a live demo. I think that is what if an attendee really wants to talk to that vendor, they're more likely to set aside that time to go when they're live and able to live chat with the vendor. And
if there's just a time when there's no other live events happening other than the vendors being live, and you schedule it at one of the prominent high traffic times, maybe over lunch, that works pretty well. So we had a question come in from Becky. Is it possible for you to show how discussion groups or breakouts work within your platform? We're going to get to the tools that are in CoreStage in just a moment. So, and then we can talk about breakout room tools that are really a feature of the virtual meeting platform that we integrate. So we will get to that, Becky. Thank you. I think we wanted to just put in a plug for our friends Jeff Cobb and Celisa Steele at the consultancy Tagoras. They've been working on virtual events for a long time. They have a virtual event report. They did a webinar last week that was very well attended about virtual events. And we've actually just chatted out or sent out the link to their virtual event report, so you can give them your email and then you'll get a link to download it. But it's very clear that virtual events have taken on more prominence just in the time since social distancing picked up and all of the live meetings started to get canceled. And we're really glad that we have Jeff and Celisa's work that they've laid the groundwork for all of us to start paying more attention to virtual events. So another thing that happened in the Tagoras webinar last week was that their kind of guest speaker was the gentleman who organizes the American Speech Language Hearing Association's online conference. So they've been doing it for several years. And he actually gave out free logins to their virtual event. So we were able to go in and take a look. It was really good benchmarking for us. It showed a great use of an online platform to do a virtual event. They were using their learning management system to implement the virtual event. And you can kind of see from this screenshot what the different sections were. So they had a central announcements board. That was basically your announcements forum, like you would have in a CoreStage course. There was a conference hall. So that was basically just a web page with links to everything that was going on in the event. The live chats were things that they had scheduled at particular times, so that adds to the experience of liveness. List of faculty, resources you could download, a calendar, CE information, etc. Kind of everything you would want from a live event online. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick check for any other questions. I don't see anything. So we'll talk about now what if you wanted to build if you are a CoreStage LMS user. Okay, lot of text on this slide, but we kind of wanted to talk about the different tools that you can use to put together your virtual event if you're going to build it yourself. So there are webinar integrations and virtual meeting integrations in course stage. These might vary depending on what you have on your particular package. Some of them are add-ons, but most of our clients are using one or another of these. So we've got GoTo, both the webinar version and the meeting version. Then there's Zoom, the webinars and meeting versions of it. We've also got WebEx and Adobe Connect. Then for streaming and recorded video, we have Vimeo. If you want to do streaming, from the LMS perspective, it's the same integration, but you do need to sign up for a higher level of Vimeo. I think it's, Amber, how much is that Vimeo Pro from Vimeo?
I don't remember off the top of my head. Yeah, the premium.
Under $1,000 a year, I think, for this.
Yeah,
so this is what
it's
you
under
pay
$1,000 a year to get the live option in Vimeo Premium.
Okay, got it. And once you have that, you can actually live stream video through Vimeo, and it will show up in your LMS. So we have an example of that. Then obviously there's the going with the education sessions are your CE and your supporting materials. So you can upload files, you can have your slides up there, other kind of documents, if you need your disclosures, any other kind of materials that you hand out live. And then the ability to get credit if you have accredited sessions, evaluations, certificates is all built in. On the networking side, these are some tools that we've seen less use of from clients who are focused on the kind of on-demand, not live style of education in the LMS. And now people are starting to discover that we do have these tools available in the LMS. They're just sitting there ready to be used if you want to start moving into more live style education in the LMS. So there's a chat module, there are forums, there's messaging, user to user. There's something called the online users block. So that'll show you who's logged in the last 5 minutes, half hour on the course level. So that'd be really useful for a virtual conference. And then there's the participants list, which is sometimes intentionally hidden from an on-demand course, but you might want to use it with your virtual event so people can see who else is attending. So you have that list of everybody else who's actually at the conference. On the exhibitor side, so you can set up pages in the LMS. The Page Pro format is really helpful here. If you want to be able to build your kind of top level menu and then have sub pages for different sections. So you create an exhibitors page and then it has sub pages coming off of that go to the one page for each of your exhibitor. You can also add forums to those pages and you can let your exhibitors message with attendees. And then just kind of having your conference home. So I think if you're familiar with the course stage nomenclature, I think we're talking about Page Pro courses here most of the time. It's certainly what we've seen our clients using. So you're building out your conference as a set of pages. You can build your own menus, or you can use the left navigation. You can customize that through Page Pro. You can, of course, there are course level calendars. You can embed widgets like Twitter and LinkedIn. You can, if you don't know how to do that, we have a quick documentation on how you can do that. So you can have people following a particular hashtag for your event, and that'll be pulled right into the LMS. You can brand on the course level. You can also customize footers, etc. There's subportals possibility here if that's something that you use. And then there's also, the ability to put sponsor logos in different places. So does that basically cover it, Amber? Is there anything else that we kind of forgot about here? There's a lot more you could do, but those are the big things.
Yeah, I think those are the big things, especially if you're doing like pre-recorded sessions. You don't even need like these integrations. You're just, you might use those systems to pre-record your sessions, but you can create this whole virtual experience in the LMS, even if you don't have a webinar integration right now.
Great. So Oh, here's a great question from Clinton. How can associations use assets made for virtual conferences after the conference is over? That's a really great point. So you're going to have a set of in the webinar platforms. If you're using those for live events, you can set those to always automatically record. So you're not going to forget to record those sessions. And then you have those assets to be used as enduring materials. Amber, you want to talk? There's a temper tantrum happening in the background here. I don't know if that's showing up.
Yeah, no problem. Yeah, so you'll have your recordings from your sessions, like Andy mentioned, and you'll have all of the assets, your PowerPoint, you can turn those into PDFs, put them right in the system, and kind of reuse the content. Even, the conversations that happen in chat, we've seen those be used as like FAQ boards as well. So you'll have all of the data and the reporting in your LMS in the system. That you can use that information and the content assets to repurpose for on-demand courses later, and more. Mm-hmm.
Okay, and question from Anonymous. Very informational, but what I need is assistance pulling this off. Well, that's a great segue.
Yeah, so that's the position that we have gotten a lot of requests from right now is how do you actually pull this off? How can we do this? Can we use our staff, or we need assistance? So one thing that we are offering is we have managed services. So we have a whole client services team, and that does production services. We've always done live webinar production services, like a webinar we're doing now. We can also fully manage the platform. So we have a virtual event platform. If you don't use our LMS, we have a virtual event platform called Conference Now, and this is a platform that's fully managed by WebCourseworks. So we would do all of the user management, set up email notifications, help with pre-recording your sessions, so kind of the pre-production with your presenters, setting up the conference in the system, running the conference, and then also providing you with the information post-conference, whether that's reports or data analytics that you need from it. So here's just an example of using our platform. So creating like a landing page. This is that conference home that we've been talking about. This will be really important just to help have a place to guide your users as they're navigating the conference. So you might have a section that links them right to all of the live keynotes. You might have a section for each day. So day 1, day 2, and the sessions there. A virtual expo hall like we've talked about. That would be something that we'd want to put on that landing page so that they can always get access to the expo hall. And these can be created, again, you guys can do it in the CourseAge LMS, or our managed services team can help produce these pages and create these conferences for you in the system.
Oops, sorry about that.
That's great. Here's an example of just laying out the sessions. So this is just the day 1 sessions for CourseAge LMS users. This is a Page Pro page using a menu navigation and giving them kind of access to those sessions at designated times. So they would just click on the graphic to get entered into the individual sessions that they want to attend. And I think the next one is the actual session page. So this is an example of a live session that's live through Vimeo, which is a really nice experience because then your attendees are attending it right in the platform. There are the webinar integrations that you can use so that they would enter into a like Zoom or GoToWebinar, but there are also options if we're producing it for you that we can have those live events play right in our system.
Yeah, we should get back to Becky's question. She asked about how to do those breakout kind of sessions in our platform.
Yeah, good question.
So Becky, I'll start and you can add more texture. So Becky, you've got options there. One thing we're suggesting is have your kind of identify your key speakers and have no more than one key speaker going live at a time. That's just kind of a tip that we've picked up on in studying this, is that virtual conference attendees want to feel like they have access to everything, and they don't like having to skip between different live events. But if you do want to do breakout sessions that are live, which you might make more sense for your particular for your members or your conference attendees, the best tool for that are the best known webinar and virtual meeting platforms. Zoom Meetings does a particularly good job of doing these breakout rooms. So you can basically have a separate presenter going in each of the rooms on Zoom, and people can choose to move between them. So those are options. You could, with the Vimeo streaming that you're seeing live right here, if you had a high enough account level with Vimeo, you could do multiple live streams, and they would appear embedded right in the LMS like this one. By the way, this chat is, this chat is the Vimeo chat. So we can embed us, and what's really nice about that is that you're seeing it synchronously with the live video. So the chat is lined up with the live video. People are talking about exactly what they're seeing on the screen at that particular moment. So other questions we're seeing. What about, is Vimeo, from Joe, is Vimeo protected in terms of who can come in? Yeah, it is. If you have, well, it depends on your account level and whether your LMS is integrated with Vimeo. So our LMS integrates with Vimeo. If you have the right for-pay account level with Vimeo, then it's protected. It's single sign-on between Vimeo and the LMS. You can also make it public, so you can just have a public embedded stream from Vimeo. So can you have concurrent live/recorded sessions for the attendee to select from? Yes, for sure. So that's just a matter of how you lay things out on the page. But yeah, you can have the recorded videos available at the same time that the live events are happening. All right, so Amber, you want to talk a bit about pricing?
Yeah, so I think the big question that a lot of people have is, what does this cost? So I know we've got a lot of clients on the call. So one thing that we're offering our clients, and this is kind of our announcement of the offer, is that we are going to be giving you guys 10 hours of free support for any virtual event production you're doing in April or May of 2020. So if you want to use the system and need help with all of the things we talked about today, we'll give you 10 hours of free support to help you set this up, answer your questions. Everything that we showed today does not require customization. Some of the kind of listed modules that Andy went through in CoreStage LMS might be add-on modules that you might not have. So you'll need to reach out to your account manager so that we can talk about what kind of event you want to do, what production value you want it to be, and then what tools we need to get set up for you and put this together for you. So that's for CoreStage LMS clients, so people who are currently using our system. And that does go, I saw a question earlier about Broadway versus Carnegie. Same story for Broadway versus Carnegie. So we'll set up a meeting with your account manager, talk about what kind of conference you want to do, and then we'll talk about what tools you need or what you have and what we can do with you. As far as Conference Now, so the virtual event platform where WebCourseWorks fully manages the production and works with your team to produce events. So that conference platform setup is discounted for April and May to $5,000 to set up the just kind of the bones of the platform setup. And then per session production, there are discounted rates for depending on what production level. So if we go back to that, we don't need to go back to the slide, but if you're doing, the production level 1 where you've got, you want to do live webinars like this, but you want our assistance with producing those and working with your presenters, we can do that. Production level 2, if you want us to work with your presenters to pre-record and then also moderate live sessions in the system, we can do that as well. And that would be production level 2. And then production level 3 is doing kind of adding all of the elements of a live conference into the virtual conference. So that's kind of the screenshot Andy showed before, where we have, you know, the live session, the live keynotes. You might have other kind of pre-recorded sessions that are being moderated live, etc. And by forming those together. So we do have discounted rates to really help you guys produce these events during this time. If you'd like our assistance, that's what we're here for. So we're happy to help. And we hope that you can take advantage of our services and work with us to make sure that your event goes off well. I'm looking at questions that are coming through.
There's a question from Becky. How much customization is involved here? Customization is always possible, depending on the extent of the requirements. But what we've been talking about is not custom functionality, at least in Carnegie. So Emily asks, this is great, but do you have an example virtual meeting that clients can look at and navigate through? Yep. So we're happy to show that. We don't have that. I don't think we're planning to show that today, but I think we're going to do a follow-up, or maybe Amber will schedule a separate meeting with you to show that. Do we have enough client support staff to handle 1, 2, or more concurrent virtual meetings if our dates were overlapping others? We're expanding our client support staff. And you're exactly right, Emily, that this is more staffing intensive than running an on-demand LMS. So we're aware of that, so great point. Jim DeSilvio asks, what's the cost without the discount?
What's the cost without the discount? You don't want a discount, Jim?
Thanks, Jim.
Well, I think we're talking to you offline, Jim, at a later time. We can definitely chat about that. Since you guys do have our platform, so clients that are using CoreStage are definitely in a better position right now because they have the software already set up. It's more how do we configure it and set up your conference. So depending on what you guys want to do, whether what kind of production level you want, we can definitely put together specific proposals based on what you're looking for. So we're happy to sit down with you, go through a full conversation to talk about what you want to do and put together what that would cost. Do you have stats to show the price difference attendees are willing to pay for attending a live versus virtual conference? Yeah, so that statistics, that stat is in the virtual events report from Tagoras.
The Tagoras report.
Yep. So I don't know.
You could get that out again, but yeah, agreed.
Yeah, I don't know it off the top of my head, but I do know that a lot of the organizations that they surveyed when they did this report did say that they charged a little bit less for the virtual event. Only a small sliver of them actually gave the virtual event away for free, and that's not what we're recommending because attendees are definitely willing to pay a fee to attend virtual conferences. And yeah, in the report, they have more stats on what they were willing to pay. Also, one thing to note is that a lot of your sponsors still will want to be involved in a virtual event. So don't forget to provide those sponsor engagement options to get more revenue for the conference from your sponsors, and setting up that exhibit hall and the way that they can engage with users will add a lot of value to your sponsors, because right now they can't go meet with their prospects either. So they're looking for these ways to connect with people.
Right, exactly. And this is speculative, but you would expect the price difference to decrease. So you'd expect people to pay more for the virtual events now with a lowered supply of real place-based live events. I mean, if there aren't alternatives to compete that are actually live meetings, then the virtual events become more important.
Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of stats talking about how, you know, they don't have to pay for flights, hotel. The attendees are saving a lot of money too by attending virtual conferences instead of going somewhere in person. So there's that value add.
Okay, I think that got through all the questions, Amber. So I'll wrap it up. We're both on LinkedIn. There are our email addresses, so A Winter and A Hicken. And thank you very much for attending to our clients and to the non-clients who attended as well. So we're looking forward to talking to you about this.
Thank you.